Welcome to episode 171 of the Loane Hockey Podcast. Where today we're going to be talking about some players to watch in the 2025 World Juniors. So, a very exciting time of year, of course, and always a lot of fun players to watch. It's going to be interesting to see if the US is able to go back to back, which would be the first time in World Junior history, in their history, that they'd be able to go back to back. And at the same time, Canada's looking to rebound from their disappointing tournament last year. And the tournament's obviously in Ottawa this year, so I would imagine there's going to be a little bit of pushback from them, and they're going to be able to make a little bit of a run here. So with Canada, they're going to be interesting to watch, of course, and then you have a lot of other players in that sense who are really sneaky guys to watch from many different teams. And we have Kazakhstan back in the mix this year at the World Juniors once again, which is going to be an interesting story there. And to see if they're able to maintain their placement at the World Junior Championships after being promoted from the Division A division. So with Canada, we'll start some standouts there since they're the home country, and we have to start with Gavin McKenna, of course. I know he's starting as the 13th forward, and I understand that. I understand why Canada does it, but to me, it just doesn't really make sense. To me, if you're a highly skilled player and you're playing like it, you should be almost guaranteed that ice time. I understand that players have to earn it, especially in this tournament, but McKenna, you look at his talent, you look at what he's able to bring, he could be an impact offensive player right away for them if he's playing, say, 16 plus minutes a game or so. And he's going to have to work his way up over time to get there. But at the same time, highly skilled talent. We know how good of a talented playmaker he is, of a goal scorer he is. He's so slick in small areas. He's generational level talent, and he's going to, I would imagine he's going to pop off in this tournament, even playing fourth line or extra role minutes because he's got that skill. He's got that ability to bring that skill inside any different role. So he's going to be a player to watch. And then, of course, we have to talk about the few other draft eligibles this year in Porter Martone and Matthew Schaefer. I think when you look at the impact of draft eligibles, it's not as prevalent in this tournament. And when you look at players like Schaefer and Martone and those type of guys, even McKenna, even though he's an underager, these guys are guys who can provide an impact almost right away. Porter Martone has a guy who can be an impact level player. He's already brought leadership. He's a captain of his team as a draft eligible player in Brampton. And then at the same time, he brings so many different attributes that he can really weaponize to become a top scorer in this tournament. I feel like for Martone, he's more of an underrated player, even though he's been very hyped up to start this year in his draft year. I feel like he's slightly underrated coming into this tournament because he might be able to pop off. And just because of the tangible assets that he brings all around in his game, he's going to be a guy that can be heavily relied upon in a top nine role if he plays consistent hockey. So he's going to be intriguing to watch. I like Easton Cowan from Canada as well, Leafs prospect, drafted in the first round, later in the first round a couple years ago by them. And he played really well in the pre-tournament games. I was really impressed with him. I really noticed him every single game, just being able to create offense, extend possessions, being able to circle around the ozone. He was a guy who was a driver of play, and he was really noticeable. I feel like Easton Collins is going to be relied upon as a top six winger in this tournament heavily. And he's going to be a guy that you really have to rely on to be able to score and provide offense because that's his game and that's what he's best at doing. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be really exciting to watch. You look at guys like Braden Yeager and Jet Luchenko, who Jet Luchenko started the year with Philadelphia, so you have some NHL experience there. And then look at guys like Berkeley Catton, and there's Carson Rakoff, and there's Ethan Gauthier, Callum Ritchie, and Tanner Howell. Like there's so much depth in terms of competitiveness and tenacity in this team, and at the same time, these are players who can provide offensive impact as well. Cole Blodwan is another one who's a Utah draft pick playing in Barrie right now. And just so many guys who can provide an impact up front offensively. It's hard to really pick one or two guys because I feel like every team has at least five guys you can really pick on to say, oh, that guy's going to do good. Like every team has at least three or four players in this tournament that end up around point per game by the end of the tournament. That's usually how it goes. Some players or some teams more than others. But with Canada, I really feel like this is a team based on the depth they have up front and the depth they have on their back end and the offensive ability that they can get from their back end. And their goaltending as well with Jack Ivankovic, he could be a really underrated player throughout this tournament to really pop off because at every single international style of play, at every international level, he's popped off to some degree. I really like Ivankovic, and I feel like he's really good and really fun to watch. But just the experience, just the competitiveness of this group, and the bitter taste in their mouth after losing early on last year for some of these guys, I feel like it's going to be a big and massive motivator for them to win, not only just to win, but to win in Ottawa, in Canada, which is massive for the country as well. So, in terms of some players in the back end, you obviously look at a lot of these guys, Oliver Bonk, Tanner Molendyk, and then Sam Dickinson. Those are going to be the guys you really want to rely upon heavily, and Matthew Schaefer, of course, as well. And there's a lot of different guys who can provide impact in the top four role. A lot of bigger guys, a lot of transitional D, two-way D, steady D. Sam Dickinson's popped off in the OHL this year. He's had an unbelievable season to start in London. He's been so exciting to watch. I just feel like he's going to bring a different gear in terms of offense in this tournament, and he's going to be fun to watch. And when you look at Matthew Schaefer, I liked him in the pre-tournament games as well. I feel like he's going to be a top four defenseman for Canada. And again, it's hard for players to crack that as a draft eligible, but I believe Schaefer has the tools to do that. And he's really, really fun to watch in that sense. So moving on to USA, a lot of guys, of course, who in terms of the O4 group, like Cutter Gauthier, Frank Nazar, and there's many more O4s. Rutger McGroarty, I'm trying to go off the top of my head here. Lane Hudson, there's many more O4s that are not coming back because of age. And Jacob Fowler is another one. And then you look at the US group this year, it's pretty good overall. I wouldn't necessarily say it's really hard to compare teams because last year was a championship team. They won a gold medal. That was a loaded group in terms of forwards and D. And there's just a lot of talent overall. And when you look at these USA group, the first thing you think of is Gabe Perreault, you think of James Higgins and then Ryan Leonard. That trio is going to be a trio to watch because they've been on a line together throughout the whole year at Boston College, and they're translating that into their power play units at the start of this tournament and then at 5-on-5 as well. So you're going to have those three together either as your first line or second line. They're pretty interchangeable when it comes to both, but likely it's going to be their first line. Those three guys together just work really well. And with Will Smith leaving BC last year, that's another guy who was on that team last year. And with Will Smith leaving and aging out, now you have James Higgins fitting in this role, who has fit the center role seamlessly at Boston College and has really adapted to Perreault and Leonard quite seamlessly. He's been exciting to watch. And then, so those three guys are my three guys to really watch when it comes to the USA. And then I look at some other guys. I really like AJ Spellici as a potential impact player who can go up and down the lineup. You can play him anywhere as a first liner or fourth liner. I feel like you're going to see a lot of impact out of Spellici. I like Joey Willis as well. I like, of course, we talked about Gabe Perreault already. Austin Bernovik's a sneaky guy who can, he was really good playing the bumper in the pre-tournament action, also in their practices. He was playing, I believe, his power play one bumper. So Bernovik's a guy you can rely upon with his skating, with his feet, with his power to be a guy who can be in the bumper position and be able to be an impact player offensively. He's really skilled off a rush. He had a really great season last year with Madison in the O, or not in the O, in the USHL. And Bernovik's a guy who was drafted by Anaheim. I feel like he's a sneaky guy to definitely do some damage throughout this tournament and be able to be a threat. You look at guys like Oliver Moore, of course, he's going to be a guy that could pop off as well. Z William on their back end, and Cole Eiserman's another one up front who could do really well. And then some other guys on their back end outside of William. Cole Hudson could provide an impact. Blake Fiddler. I like Blake Fiddler's game. I've talked about on my podcast before. And Ram Minetian and EJ Emery can be two steady, shutdown-ish style defensemen who can play that role seamlessly. And Trey Augustine, you're looking at arguably the best goalie in the tournament. He was so good last year. He's having an even better season this year with Michigan State on the number one ranked team. His game has continued to improve, and he's going to be the backbone of this team. Very poised in net, very calm in net. That's what they're going to need throughout this tournament to be able to make an impact on a regular basis. And then we move on to Sweden and some players there. I don't honestly, I don't know as much about Sweden compared to other teams. So I'm going to keep this relatively short. But Victor Eklund, of course, William Eklund's brother, plays with Djurgården in the tier two Swedish system right now. And Eklund's a guy who is a little bit rawer compared to William at the same age. And Victor, he's still, I wouldn't say raw. That's kind of the wrong term. But he is a little bit different stylistically than William because I feel like William, when you watch this game in his draft here, you saw the flow in tandem with his puck skills and everything like that. Victor's a little bit different in the sense where he can really control the flow of the game with his puck skill, but also he can control play one on one and control play in very tight spaces. So Victor Eklund, a guy who is challenging for a top 10 spot in the draft, top 15, or somewhere around there right now, I would say. He's talented and he's a dual threat winger. He can shoot, he can pass, he can delegate, he can delay on the play, he can toe drag with the puck, he can use his hip pocket with the puck. He's really skilled with the puck on his stick, and I really enjoy watching him. And then you look at some other guys like David Edstrom's going to be a guy who can provide an impact as well. Otto Stenberg, of course, coming back, and some of those other guys up front. On the back end, you look at Axel, Sandy, and Pelica with defensemen to watch throughout this tournament by far. He's going to be really electrifying for Sweden. He played for them last year, of course, and he's coming back this year. It's going to be interesting to see what his offensive impact is and how he can sustain that. But the two-way elements are there to his game. He's going to be a really underrated defenseman for Detroit in years to come. I feel like he's going to be a staple in their top four just with how well he's played in the SHL this year and how he can translate that to the NHL. Because when you're playing pro hockey already in Sweden, it's a little bit easier to translate that over to the NHL. Again, it's a much different league. You have much less width in terms of boards and stuff like that in the NHL compared to Swedish hockey. But at the same time, Axel Sandy Pellikka is a guy who can provide that impact, that steady impact in many different situations. And then, of course, Theo Lindstein, I like him a lot on the back end. And then Tom Willander from Boston University, who was there last year. So they got some steady defensemen, some mobile defensemen, and guys can incorporate a lot of different elements to the game. And then goalie wise, Melvin Strahl from Youngstown would be an interesting one to watch. And they obviously had some other Swedish goalies who can be in that mix for that first and that starting role. So as we move on to Finland, Emil Hemming is a good player to watch. Again, I haven't seen too much of Finland, so I can't really speak too heavily about them. Constantine Helenius, I feel like is going to pop off throughout this tournament. That's one guy I really know and have watched previously. I really like his game. He's playing really well in Rochester, and I wouldn't necessarily say you need to rush him right now to the NHL. It's just more a matter of him being able to provide an impact in the AHL and then translate that over time. But he's going to be really good in this tournament, and I feel like he's going to have at least a point per game in terms of his numbers. And Kasper Halttunen from London as well. So some other guys, Jesse Nurmi, guys like those. And then on their back end, I feel like Aaron Kiviharju, this is his third World Junior. I feel like he's going to be making a huge impact in this tournament. He's fun to watch. He's a good transitional D, and I feel like he's going to pop off. And just with the injury issues that he's had in the past and how he can really pop off throughout this tournament and get better and better each and every game, it's going to be really intriguing to watch when it comes to him. And I don't really recognize too many of the goalies. Czechia, we'll go through them quickly as well. I'm trying to recognize some of the names on this roster. Edward Chala from Coachella Valley in the AHL, obviously an intriguing prospect for Seattle, really skilled with the puck. He's a lanky guy. He's got a lanky frame and lanky base to his feet, but at the same time, he's really skilled. He's a dual threat carrier where he can use handling skill. He can handle with his hip pocket. He can handle the side of his body, handle in front of him, handle with deception, make cross seam plays with deception. He's got a little different elements when it comes to him. Adam Ziglicki, I actually liked him. I remember watching the Canada versus Czechia pre-tournament game. He was actually really intriguing to me. I didn't know anything about him until I saw the name Ziglicki, and I watched him. I was like, this guy would not go away. He was a pest. He was annoying. He was always around the puck. He was very, very annoying to play against because he had that tenacity and that detail to his game. But Zidlicky could be an underrated player to watch for Czechia. I liked his game in the pre-tournament. Again, it's only one game, it's a sample size, but I feel like you could potentially see more impact out of him as the tournament goes on. and some other players. Adam Novotny, of course, 2026 NHL draft eligible. So basically, any player with a bubble in this tournament or a cage on, is a good player because they're playing as an underager typically. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, Adam Juracek on the back end, a guy who's playing in Brantford, so he could really pop off and he could be an impact player as well. I don't really recognize too many other names on this list, to be honest. But those are some names from Czechia. Oh, Michael Horeyball in net. We can't miss him. He was really good for them last year. He stole some games for them last year. And he's a big rangy goalie. He plays at UMass. I've watched him previously. I really like his foundation to his goaltending, how he's able to expand the net and really make himself bigger. Yes, he's 6'6", so he's already big in net, but he can make himself even bigger to shut down more of the net. He's really hard to get past because of that height and that ability to make himself expand. So he's really intriguing to watch in that sense. And on Slovakia, I like Thomas Pobazel. He's a center for the 2025 NHL draft. He's got a little bit of raw skill, a little bit raw in terms of how he's able to process the play and stuff like that. But at the same time, he's got some intriguing puck skills, some intriguing playmaking. I'm gonna be intrigued to watch and intrigued to see how he does. Miroslav Shatan, who's the son of Miroslav Shatan, plays in Sioux Falls in the USHL, seventh round pick by Washington. I like his game. He's a lanky guy. He's a big guy. He doesn't have a ton of skill per se, and he's not necessarily super offense based per se, but a guy who can definitely be relied upon in the faceoff dot defensively, those type of situations. Dalibor Dvorsky, who I believe this is also his third World Junior. He has been unbelievable for Springfield. He's been fun to watch in the AHL, very dynamic with the puck and just dynamic at control and play. So that's another one to watch. Yuri Pekarsik, and who is a St. Louis draft pick, is another good one as well. And then on the back end, Maxime Sturbach from Michigan State in the NCAA, a Buffalo draft pick. And I like his steadiness. I like his two-way ability. I like his puck movement and how he's able to make plays in transition, moving up ice. He's got that heads up awareness. He's not going to be necessarily a super impact defenseman in the NHL if he makes it there. I see him being more of a bottom four, top six type guy who can interchange up and down those three pairings in the NHL. But definitely some intriguing upside to his game. Jacob Chromiak as well. That's another one. Luka Radivojevic from Muskegon in the USHL who just came over. And he's an intriguing guy to watch, intriguing defenseman. I don't necessarily envision him going in the first round, but surely a guy who could play or could go in the second or third round in the NHL draft. I feel like he's got a lot of intriguing skill. He's fun to watch, and he's got a lot of talent to his game. He's going to be an interesting and a very steady defenseman to watch at this tournament. Again, I don't see him going super high in the draft, but he's a very intriguing option when it comes to his game. And then I'm trying to look through Germany's rosters to see if I recognize any names. David Lewandowski is an interesting one. He's played with what are the trio? The Griva brothers. So the Gustav Skriva and Rahard Skriva, and those guys, along with Lewandowski, have played together internationally at many different younger age groups prior. They're not here, but with Lewandowski, you're getting some intriguing center skill who can control the face-off dot. He can control plays two-way, and he can control plays offensively with his playmaking and stuff like that. So he's intriguing to watch from that perspective, and I'm gonna be curious to see how he does for Germany. That's one guy I definitely have my eye on for sure. And just looking through the rest of the roster right now, I don't know too many. Simon Seidel, I recognize that name. I don't really remember from where to be exact. And then, of course, Nolan Panoka from Green Bay in the USHL is a guy who's really intriguing when it comes to shutdown ability, being able to defend rushes, and be steady defensively, and he's not super offensively oriented, but defensively brings some elements to his game that can really allow him to control play. He's a Buffalo draft pick as well, so he'll be an interesting one. And then I don't recognize any of the goalies. And then for Switzerland, I'm trying to see if I notice any names here as well. Honestly, I don't. I'm scrolling through the forwards and their defense. I don't really notice anybody. Kristen Kirsch from Green Bay in net is the one guy I noticed he's a San Jose draft pick. He was drafted by San Jose in the 2024 draft. He's intriguing and he's got some upside there, and he's going to be an interesting player to watch. And then Latvia, I don't recognize too many names here. Other than some guys who are either tendered to the USHL or in the NAHL, or some guys, if you're lucky, they play in the queue. So there's the odd mix of both in that sense. And then let's see who else. Kazakhstan, I don't notice anybody or any other names on here. So those are some standouts those are some standouts and some players to watch throughout the 2025 World Junior Championship.